Welcome back to Tina Romance Library, where powerful alphas fall hard, and the women they underestimate change everything. Every story here is complete, immersive, and emotion-driven. No cliffhangers, no rushed endings, just full romances you can sink into. Today's story? A girl who's been treated like a houseplant by her own family runs away and accidentally saves a dying werewolf king who, plot twist, turns out to be way more polite than her actual relatives. Now she's got a mate bond, a crown, and the shocking realization that the monsters in the forest have better manners than the humans who raised her. So if you love possessive alphas, strong heroines who don't beg, slow burn tension, and emotional payoffs, you're in the right place. I need you to join the pack right now by subscribing. Leave a like if you enjoy immersive romance, and settle in because once the story begins, we don't stop until the ending. Now, let's get into it. For 15 years, I was not a daughter. I was labor. Let me paint you a picture of what that really means. It's 4:30 in the morning, and the world outside is still wrapped in that thick, heavy darkness that comes just before dawn. The kind of dark that makes you feel like you're the only person alive. Inside this house, this beautiful, warm house that was supposed to be my home, the floors are so cold they bite at my bare feet with every step. I've learned not to flinch anymore. Pain is just another chore on the list. I'm on my knees in the kitchen, scrubbing at a stain that's probably been there longer than I've been alive. And upstairs, they're sleeping. My father, my stepmother, my half-sisters who get to be actual daughters, actual people with names that matter and voices that are heard. They're wrapped in soft blankets, dreaming whatever dreams people have when they know they're loved. And here I am, 17 years old, with hands so raw they crack and bleed in the winter, making sure everything is perfect before they wake up. Because if it's not perfect, if there's a single dish out of place or a single spot of dust on the mantel, I'll hear about it. Not with words, though. My stepmother stopped using words with me years ago. She uses silence. She uses those thin, pressed lips, and that look that look like I'm something she stepped in on her way to somewhere important. And my father, he just looks away. Always looks away. I used to wonder if he even remembered I was his daughter. Now I know he does. He just doesn't care. You want to know the really twisted part? I used to make jokes about it in my head just to keep myself sane. Little observations that nobody else would ever hear because, well, nobody listened to me anyway. Like how even the broom had more authority in this house than I did. The broom got to lean against the wall in the hallway, front and center, where everyone could see it. Me? I slept in a closet. Literally, a converted storage space under the stairs that smelled like mothballs and forgotten things. The broom got more respect. The broom had a purpose everyone acknowledged. I was just there, a ghost who cooked and cleaned and made sure the real family could live their real lives without ever having to think about the ugly parts, the dirty parts, the parts that required getting on your knees at 4:30 in the morning while your body screamed for sleep and your soul screamed for something, anything that felt like love. The water in my bucket has gone from scalding to lukewarm to cold, and my arms are shaking from exhaustion, but I keep scrubbing because that's what I do. That's all I do. Survive until tomorrow, when I'll wake up and do it all again. I don't remember exactly when I became this. When I stopped being Issa, just Issa, a girl who liked strawberries and used to dance in the garden when she thought no one was watching and became the help. The burden. The mistake my father made with his first wife. The one who died and left him stuck with me. Maybe it was gradual, like winter creeping in so slowly you don't realize you're freezing until your fingers have gone numb. Or maybe it happened all at once, the day he brought her home with those two daughters who looked at me like I was an insect they couldn't quite be bothered to crush. Either way, by the time I was old enough to understand what had happened, it was already too late. I was already invisible. But here's what they don't tell you about being invisible. About being nothing for so long you almost start to believe it yourself. You start watching. You start seeing things that visible people miss because they're too busy being seen. And you start hoping even when you know hope is the most dangerous thing a girl like me can carry. That maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there is a life that doesn't taste like ash and smell like bleach. You start believing that maybe you're not nothing after all. Even if you have to scrub 1,000 floors before you can prove it. The twins were born when I was 7. And I remember thinking they looked like little pink potatoes wrapped in the softest blankets I'd ever seen. I remember reaching out to touch just one finger on his tiny hand and my stepmother slapping my wrist so hard it left marks for days. "Dirty hands," she'd said, her voice sharp as winter wind. "You'll make them sick." My hands weren't dirty. I'd just washed them. But that was the first time I understood that it didn't matter what was true. It only mattered what she said was true. The boys, Marcus and Julian, they became the sun and moon of this household. Everything revolved around them. Their education, their comfort, their futures as young men who would inherit my father's business, his name, his legacy. My father, who'd barely looked at me since I was 5, suddenly had all the warmth in the world for them. I'd watch him lift them up, toss them in the air while they shrieked with laughter, and something inside me would crack a little more each time. Because I remembered, just barely, when he used to look at me like that, before my mother died, before he decided that loving me was too painful a reminder of what he'd lost. So he just stopped. But here's where it gets really ugly, the part that makes my stomach twist even now. They didn't just ignore me. That would have been almost bearable. Instead, they made sure I knew exactly what I was missing. Every single day. "Isa, the boys need their breakfast. Make sure Marcus gets extra bacon, he's growing so fast. Isa, Julian has a test today. Press his good shirt." "Not that one, the other one." "Are you stupid?" "Isa, your brothers are studying. Keep your noise down." My brothers. She called them my brothers like it was supposed to make me feel included, part of the family. But it was just another way to remind me of my place. They were being groomed for greatness. I was being groomed to serve that greatness. The village elders used to come by sometimes, these old men with their pipes and their judgments, and they'd nod approvingly at how well my father's household ran. "A man needs sons," they'd say, clapping him on the back. "And a girl who knows her place is worth her weight in gold." They'd glance at me, scrubbing in the corner or serving tea with my eyes down, and smile like I was a well-trained dog, like this was natural, like this was right. In our village, that's just how things were. Girls learned to cook, clean, sew, and keep quiet. Boys learned to read, write, manage money, and speak their minds. Oh, the wealthy families might educate their daughters enough to make them attractive marriage prospects, but families like mine, working families who'd had a run of bad luck, girls were insurance. Girls were labor you didn't have to pay for. And that's the thing they never said out loud, but I felt in every single interaction. I was free. Free labor with nowhere to go and no way to leave. When Marcus turned 10, my father hired a tutor, a real teacher who came 3 times a week to instruct both boys in reading, mathematics, history. I used to linger outside the door, listening to the lessons, mouthing the words they were learning. Once, the tutor caught me. I thought he might tell my father, might get me in trouble for daring to want something that wasn't meant for me. Instead, he looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or disgust, and quietly closed the door in my face. That door closing, that soft click of the latch, that was louder than any scream. I asked my stepmother once, just once, if I could sit in on the lessons. I was 12, and I'd worked up the courage for weeks, rehearsing the words until they felt smooth enough to say out loud. She was mixing bread dough, her hands moving in practiced circles, and she didn't even pause, didn't even look up. Why would you need an education, Isa? You're not going anywhere. Not a question, a fact, the way you'd say the sky is blue or winter is cold. But I could help more if I knew how to read better, keep accounts. You can read enough, and I keep the accounts. Her hands never stopped moving, kneading and folding like my words were just air. Your place is here, taking care of this family. That's what daughters do. But the boys are men. They have futures. You have duties. I wanted to scream that I was a child too, that I deserved a future too, that this wasn't fair and she knew it wasn't fair. But I'd learned by then that fairness was something other people got to have, not me. Never me. So I swallowed it down like I swallowed everything else, the anger, the hurt, the howling desperate need to be seen as something more than a pair of hands to cook and clean. I pushed it down so deep I almost convinced myself it wasn't there. Almost. The worst part? They made me believe I deserved it. That's what really good manipulation does. It makes you question your own reality until you can't trust yourself anymore. When I'd forget to do something, forget one item on the endless list of tasks, my stepmother would sigh like I'd wounded her. After everything we've done for you, Isa, giving you a home, food, a roof, and you can't even remember to bring in the washing? As if I owed them for the privilege of being their servant. As if they were doing me some kind of favor by letting me work myself to exhaustion every single day. My father was even worse because his weapon was silence. He'd look at me sometimes, really look at me, and I'd see something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or regret. But then he'd blink and it would be gone. Replaced by nothing, by emptiness. Like I was a problem he'd solved by simply refusing to acknowledge I existed. No pay, no education, no choice. That was my life distilled down to its essence. I watched my half-sisters, the older ones, my stepmother's daughters from her first marriage, get married off to decent men with decent prospects. I watched them leave this house with hope in their eyes and dresses I'd sewn with my own bleeding fingers. And I knew, with a certainty that sat like a stone in my belly, that no one was coming for me. No decent man wanted a girl with no dowry, no family support, no prospects. I wasn't marriage material. I was labor. And labor doesn't get to dream. But late at night, in my closet under the stairs, with the smell of mothballs and my own exhaustion thick in my throat, I did dream. I dreamed of running. So far this house became just a dark spot on the horizon. I dreamed of a place where my voice mattered, where my hands created instead of just cleaned. I dreamed of someone, anyone, looking at me and seeing a person worth knowing. I just didn't know that dreams could be dangerous, or that sometimes they come true in ways that rip your entire world apart. It happened on a Tuesday. Isn't it strange how the worst moments of your life can happen on the most ordinary days? I was peeling potatoes in the kitchen, mountains of them, because my stepmother was hosting some church women for tea, and apparently that required enough potatoes to feed an army when my father walked in. Not unusual. What was unusual was that he looked directly at me, actually met my eyes for longer than a second. My hands stilled in the water. Something cold slithered down my spine. Isa. His voice was formal, distant, like he was speaking to a merchant about a transaction. Come to my study after dinner. Your stepmother and I need to discuss your future. My future. I'd lived in this house for 17 years, and those were the first 2 words anyone had ever said about me having one. I should have known better than to hope. Dinner was torture. I served them, the twins arguing over something stupid, my stepmother picking at her food with that pinched expression she wore like armor, my father silent and elsewhere. I wasn't allowed to eat with them, of course. I'd take my portion later, standing at the counter, shoveling food into my mouth between washing dishes. But that night I couldn't even think about eating. My stomach was a knot of dread and something else, something I was afraid to name. What if they were sending me away? What if this was it? They'd finally decided I wasn't worth keeping around. The study smelled like pipe tobacco and old paper. My father sat behind his desk like a judge. My stepmother perched in the chair beside him like a crow waiting for something to die. I stood in front of them with my hands clasped, my head slightly bowed, the perfect picture of an obedient daughter. Lord Brennan's estate is looking for household staff, my father began, not bothering with preamble. He's willing to take you on. Room and board provided. Lord Brennan. I knew the name, everyone did. An older man, widowed, with a reputation for being difficult. His estate was 2 days' travel north, deep in the hills where the forest grew thick and wild. It's a good opportunity, my stepmother added, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You'll have structure, purpose, and you'll be out from under our feet. There it was, the truth underneath the pretty words. They were getting rid of me. You'll leave in 3 days, my father continued, already looking down at the papers on his desk like I'd been dismissed. Pack your things. What little you have, what little I have. As if I owned anything in this house beyond the clothes on my back and the shame they'd wrapped me in. I need you to sign here. He pushed a document toward me, and even though my reading wasn't great, I could make out enough. A work contract, binding, for 5 years, with the possibility of extension. 5 years of serving a man I'd never met, in a house I'd never seen, with no guarantee of anything except more of what I'd already endured. What if I don't want to go? The words slipped out before I could stop them. My stepmother's eyes went sharp. Excuse me? My voice was shaking, but I forced myself to continue. What if I want to stay? The laugh that came out of her was like glass breaking. Stay? And do what, Isa? You're 17. You're not getting any younger, and you're certainly not getting any more useful. We've fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your ungrateful head for years. This is your chance to contribute something, to earn your keep somewhere else. I've been earning my keep here since I was 5 years old." The words came out quiet, but they landed like stones in water, sending ripples through the room. My father's head snapped up. My stepmother went very, very still. "How dare you?" she whispered, and there was real venom in it now, the mask finally slipping. "After everything we've done for you, you ungrateful, selfish girl, you will sign that paper and you will go to Lord Brennan's estate, and you will be thankful for the opportunity. And if I refuse?" My father stood then, his chair scraping against the floor. He wasn't a tall man, but in that moment he seemed to fill the entire room. "Then you leave this house with nothing. Not a coin, not a reference, not a scrap of food. You'll be on the street by morning. Is that what you want? The street or servitude. Those were my choices. The only choices girls like me ever got." I looked at that paper, at my father's cold eyes, at my stepmother's triumphant sneer, and something inside me that had been bending for 17 years finally snapped. "I'll pack my things," I said quietly. The relief on their faces was almost funny. Almost. They thought they'd won, thought they'd finally solved the problem of me. They had no idea what they'd actually done. I went to my closet that night and stared at my pathetic collection of belongings. 2 dresses, both worn thin at the elbows, a shawl my mother had made, the only thing of hers I had left, a stub of a candle. That was it. That was my entire life, fit into a bag small enough to carry with one hand. I sat on my thin mattress and let myself feel it, all of it. The rage, the grief, the bone-deep exhaustion of being unwanted for so long I'd almost convinced myself I deserved it. I let it wash over me like a wave, and when it receded, something else remained. Clarity. I wasn't going to Lord Brennan's estate. I wasn't going to sign my life away to another 5 years of this. I wasn't going to let them win. I was leaving. Tonight. On my own terms. The plan wasn't complicated because it didn't need to be. I'd wait until everyone was asleep, take what little I had, and walk out the front door. They'd wake up to find me gone, and good riddance to them. Let them explain to Lord Brennan why his new servant ran away. Let them choke on their own disappointment. The house settled into its nighttime sounds, creaking beams, the twins snoring, my father's heavy footsteps overhead, then silence. I waited another hour just to be sure, my heart hammering so hard I was afraid someone would hear it through the walls. Then I moved. Every step down that hallway felt like walking through water, slow and dreamlike. I passed the kitchen where I'd spent thousands of hours. The parlor I'd dusted until my arms ached. The stairs I'd scrubbed on my hands and knees more times than I could count. I felt nothing looking at them. No sadness, no nostalgia, just a cold, clean emptiness. The front door was unlocked. They never locked it. Never thought anyone would be stupid enough to wander the roads at night, and when I pulled it open, the cool air hit my face like a blessing. I stepped outside and didn't look back. The road stretched before me, silver in the moonlight. Behind me was everything I'd ever known, a house that had never been a home, a family that had never wanted me. Ahead of me was the unknown, and the forest that everyone said was dangerous, full of wild things and wilder stories. I started walking, and I swear to God, I almost laughed. Because here's the thing they didn't understand. The thing I'd learned in 17 years of being nothing. You can't be afraid of the dark when you've been living in it your whole life. The forest might have wolves and spirits and whatever else people whispered about in frightened voices. But I'd survived my family. How much worse could the wild possibly be? Turns out I was about to find out. And turns out the answer was complicated. The first night I felt like a god. Free. Actually, genuinely free for the first time in my memory. Every step away from that house was lighter than the last, like I was shedding weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying. The moon lit my path and the night air tasted sweet, and I walked until my feet ached, and then I walked some more because I could, because nobody was waiting for me to come back and scrub their floors. The second night, reality set in with teeth. I'd found shelter in an abandoned shepherd's hut, 3 walls and half a roof, but it kept the worst of the wind off, and that's when my stomach started reminding me that freedom doesn't fill your belly. I had no food. No water except what I could find in streams. No plan beyond getting as far away as possible. I'd been so focused on escaping that I hadn't thought about what came after. By the 3rd day, I was rationing the last of some wild berries I'd found. The kind my mother had shown me years ago were safe to eat. My lips were cracked, my feet were blistered, bloody, and the forest had stopped feeling like freedom and started feeling like a very beautiful trap. The trees here were old, ancient, the kind that made you feel small and temporary, like they'd been here long before humans figured out how to build houses, and they'd be here long after we were gone. The canopy was so thick that even at midday, the light came through green and filtered, like being underwater. It was beautiful in a way that made your chest tight. Beautiful and utterly indifferent to whether I lived or died. I should have been terrified, should have turned back. But going back meant admitting defeat. Meant crawling back to my father's house and begging for scraps. Meant Lord Brennan's estate and 5 years of my life signed away. So I kept walking deeper. The rain started on the 4th night, and it wasn't the gentle spring rain that kisses your face. This was autumn rain, cold and mean, the kind that soaks through every layer until you can't remember what dry feels like. I was shivering so hard my teeth were chattering, huddled under a rocky overhang that barely qualified as shelter, watching water sheet down in silver curtains. That's when I heard it. A sound that made every hair on my body stand up. Low and rumbling, not quite a growl, not quite a moan. The sound of something in pain. Every instinct I had screamed at me to stay put, stay small, stay invisible like I'd learned to do so well. But there was something in that sound, something that bypassed my brain entirely and went straight to some deeper part of me that understood suffering. I'd spent 17 years listening to my own silent screams. I recognized the echo of them in that sound. So I did the stupidest, bravest thing I'd ever done. I went toward it. The forest at night in the rain was a nightmare of shadows and sliding earth. I slipped twice, caught myself on trees that felt more solid than anything in my life had ever been, and followed that sound deeper into the dark. My heart was trying to hammer its way out of my chest, but I didn't stop. I found him in a clearing. Calling him huge doesn't do it justice. He was massive, easily 7 feet of coiled muscle and dark fur, and even collapsed on his side, bleeding from wounds I could see even in the dark. He was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. A wolf. But not a wolf. Too big, too human in the way his body was shaped, the way his eyes tracked me as I stumbled into the clearing and froze. Those eyes, God, those eyes. They glowed amber in the darkness, bright and intelligent, and full of a pain so visceral I felt it in my own body. He was dying. I could see that. Whatever had happened to him, the gashes across his chest and shoulder looked like claw marks from something even bigger than he was losing the fight. He growled, a warning that vibrated through the ground, but there was no strength behind it, just defiance. Just the desperate snarl of something that refused to die quietly. I should have run. Every single survival instinct I possessed was screaming at me to run. Instead, I took a step forward. His eyes narrowed, his lips pulled back from teeth that could tear me apart without effort. But he didn't move. Couldn't move. Maybe. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said, and my voice sounded strange and small in the rain. "I know that's probably the stupidest thing you've ever heard, but I'm not." Another step. The mud squelched under my feet. The rain plastered my hair to my face and I could barely see, but I kept moving toward this creature that should have been impossible, that couldn't exist outside of stories grandmothers told to scare children. Except he was real, bleeding and broken and real. "I don't have much," I continued, like having a conversation with a dying monster was a normal thing to do. "But I have water. And I know some things about wounds. My mother, she used to help people, before she died." I was close enough now to see the rise and fall of his chest, labored and uneven. Close enough to smell blood and rain and something else. Something wild that made my head spin. He watched me with those burning eyes, and I swear to God, there was intelligence there. Not animal cunning, human intelligence, understanding. I knelt in the mud beside him, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unbind the cloth I'd been using as a shawl. "This is going to hurt," I whispered. His response was a low rumble that might have been agreement or might have been a warning. I chose to believe agreement. The wounds were worse up close. Deep gouges that went down to muscle, maybe bone. Whatever had attacked him had meant to kill, and had nearly succeeded. I used my water, the last of my water, to clean the worst of the blood away, then pressed my shawl to the deepest gash, applying pressure like my mother had taught me a lifetime ago. He growled, his whole body going tense, but he didn't snap at me, didn't move except for the shudder that ran through him. I know, I said softly. I know it hurts, but you have to let me try. We stayed like that as the rain poured down, me kneeling in the mud, pressing cloth to the wounds of an impossible creature, him watching me with eyes that held more questions than I had answers for. I don't know how long it lasted. Time went strange, stretching and contracting. Eventually, the bleeding slowed. Eventually, his breathing evened out slightly. Eventually, I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open, but I didn't let go. When dawn started to gray the sky, something changed. The creature, the wolf thing, shifted, not moving away from me, but toward me. His massive head lowered until it was nearly touching the ground, and his eyes, those impossible amber eyes, looked up at me through the wet fur plastered to his face. He was bowing. This creature that could have killed me with one swipe of his claws, this impossible thing that shouldn't exist, was bowing to me like I was something precious, something important. My breath caught, my hands stilled, and in that moment, with dawn breaking and rain falling and this monster treating me with more reverence than my own family ever had, I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not breaking, blooming. I reached out with one shaking hand and touched his head, felt the coarse wet fur under my fingers, felt the warmth of him, the solid reality of him. "What are you?" I whispered. His eyes held mine, and I swear I saw understanding there, maybe even recognition, like he'd been looking for me too, like fate had teeth, and it had just sunk them in deep. He shifted as the sun rose. I don't have words for what that looked like. Bones reforming, fur receding, the massive wolf shape condensing into something almost human but not quite. I should have been horrified, should have scrambled backward and run screaming into the forest. Instead, I sat there in the mud, exhausted and fascinated, watching the impossible happen right in front of me. When it was over, a man knelt where the wolf had been. Calling him a man feels insufficient. He was tall, even kneeling, he was nearly at my eye level with shoulders broad enough to block out the rising sun. His skin was tan, marked with scars that told stories of violence survived. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, wet and tangled with leaves. And his face, God, his face. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. He should have been terrifying. He was beautiful in the way storms are beautiful, in the way things that could kill you are beautiful. The wounds I'd tried to bandage were still there, angry red slashes across his chest and shoulder, but they looked better, less fatal, like his body was already starting to heal in ways human bodies couldn't. He was also completely naked. I turned my face away fast, heat flooding my cheeks despite the cold, despite everything, of all the things to be embarrassed about in this moment, but apparently my brain decided that was the hill to die on. I heard him move, heard fabric rustling, and when I dared look back, he'd found pants from somewhere maybe hidden nearby. Maybe he'd planned for this and was carefully pulling them on, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounds. "You should rest," I said. "Because what else do you say to a man who was a wolf an hour ago? You're still hurt." "I will heal." His voice was deeper than I expected, rough like he hadn't used it in a while, with an accent I couldn't place. "The question is whether you will." I blinked. "What?" He settled back against a tree with a barely suppressed grunt of pain. Those amber eyes, still amber, still glowing slightly in the dawn light, fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You are soaked, exhausted, and you gave me the last of your water." A pause. "Also, you are bleeding." I looked down at my hands and realized he was right. My palms were torn up from catching myself when I'd slipped, and there were scratches on my arms I didn't remember getting. Nothing serious. Nothing compared to what he'd survived. "I'm fine," I said automatically, "because that's what you say. That's what girls like me always say." His eyebrow raised slightly, and somehow that tiny expression conveyed more skepticism than entire speeches. "You are not fine. You are alone in a forest that would kill you within 3 days, with no supplies and no destination." He tilted his head. "Why?" The question was so direct, so devoid of judgment, that I found myself answering honestly, "Because anywhere is better than where I was." Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "Your family." Not a question, a statement. Like he could read the story written on my skin, in the way I held myself, in the fact that I'd chosen possible death over certain misery. "They're not my family," I said quietly. "They just happen to be related to me. There's a difference." He nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he already knew. Then he did something that made my entire world tilt sideways. He bowed his head. Not like before, when he'd been in wolf form and possibly delirious from blood loss. This was deliberate, formal. He pressed his right fist to his chest and inclined his head in a gesture that looked old, ritual, weighted with meaning I didn't understand. "My name is Draven," he said, "king of the northern Lycan territories, and I owe you a life debt." I stared at him. "King," he'd said king, like that was a normal thing to be, like I was supposed to know what that meant. "I'm Issa," I managed, "and I'm nobody." His eyes snapped to mine, sharp. "The woman who saved my life is not nobody." The certainty in his voice made something twist in my chest. When was the last time someone had said my name like it mattered? When had anyone looked at me like I was something more than an inconvenience? I started, but he cut me off with a raised hand. "You found me dying, and instead of fleeing, you helped. You used your last resources to tend my wounds. You stayed with me through the night." His jaw tightened. "In my world, that means something. That means everything." I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process the weight he was giving to actions that had felt almost instinctive. You see something suffering, you help. That was just being human, wasn't it? Apparently not. Apparently it was something more. "I can offer you shelter," Draven continued, his voice careful now, measured. "Food, safety, a place to rest while you decide what you want to do next. My territory is half a day's walk from here. You would be under my protection." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "But I am asking, not commanding. The choice is yours, Issa. Always yours. The choice is yours." 4 words that hit me like a physical blow, because nobody had ever given me a choice before. Not about where I lived or what I did or who I served. Choices were for people who mattered, not for girls like me. And here was this man, this king, this creature out of stories asking permission, offering, not demanding, treating me like I had the right to refuse. I almost laughed. Would have if I'd had the energy, because here was the cosmic joke. The monster was more polite than my own family had ever been. "Your territory," I said slowly. "You mean there are more of you?" "Many more. We live separately from humans for obvious reasons, but we have our own laws, our own customs." His eyes never left mine. "Among my kind, life debts are sacred. You saved me. That means you are under my protection, whether you accept my offer or not. But I would prefer you accept. The forest is not safe for humans alone. It wasn't safe for you either," I pointed out. A ghost of something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "No, it was not." The smile faded. "There are things in these woods that hunt my kind. Things older and darker than the stories humans tell. I was careless, and I paid for it. You should not have to pay for my mistakes. I should have had questions, should have been demanding answers about what he was, what this all meant, what things in the woods implied. But exhaustion was pulling at me like an undertow, and my body was starting to register just how cold I was, how hungry, how completely spent. "If I come with you," I said carefully, "what would you expect from me?" His brow furrowed slightly. "Expect?" "In return, for the shelter and food and safety. What would I owe you?" Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by something that looked like anger not at me, but for me. "Nothing. You would owe me nothing. The debt is mine, not yours. That's not how the world works." "It is how my world works." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. "Among my kind, we do not trade in servitude. You saved my life. I offer you protection. There is no transaction beyond that, no debt that needs repaying. If you choose to stay, you would be a guest, honored and safe." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt. But 17 years of learning that nothing came without cost, that every kindness had strings attached, made it hard to trust words that sounded too good to be true. He must have seen it on my face because he leaned forward slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounds. "I know you have no reason to trust me. I am a stranger, a monster by any human measure. But I swear to you on my crown, on my pack, on everything I hold sacred, you will be safe with me. No one will hurt you. No one will demand anything from you. And if you wish to leave at any time, I will help you find your way wherever you want to go." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, and maybe it was stupid, maybe I was being naive, but something in me recognized truth when I heard it. Besides, what was my alternative? Wander until I collapsed? Hope I stumbled onto some village that might take pity on a homeless girl with nothing to offer? At least with him, I might survive long enough to figure out what came next. "Okay," I whispered. His entire body seemed to relax. Tension I hadn't realized he was carrying bleeding out of his shoulders. "Okay? I'll come with you. To your territory. Just—" I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how pathetic I must look. "Just for a little while. Until I figure something out. As long as you need," he said quietly. Then, carefully, like he was approaching something wild that might bolt, he stood and offered me his hand. I stared at it, at the scars on his knuckles, the calluses that spoke of weapon use, the strange gentleness in the gesture. Then I reached up and let him pull me to my feet. His hand was warm, strong, steady, and for the first time and longer than I could remember, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay. Even if okay came with claws and impossible transformations and a king who bowed. We walked in silence for the first hour. Draven moved like someone who knew every tree, every stone, every shadow in this forest. Despite his wounds that should have had him flat on his back for days, he walked steady and sure, occasionally glancing back to make sure I was keeping up, which I barely was. My legs felt like they were made of lead. My vision kept going fuzzy at the edges, and I was pretty sure I was running on nothing but stubbornness at this point. When I stumbled for the third time, catching myself on a tree trunk, he stopped. "We rest," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I'm fine," I lied, "because that's what you do. You don't show weakness. You don't let people see you struggling because that's when they hurt you." He looked at me for a long moment, those amber eyes seeing right through the lie. "You are exhausted. I am still healing. We both need rest." A pause. There is no shame in it. The gentleness in his voice undid something in me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and let him guide me to a small clearing, where a stream bubbled over smooth stones. He moved with practiced efficiency, gathering wood, building a fire that caught on the first try. Within minutes, warmth was radiating from the flames, and I found myself drawn to it like a moth. I sat close enough to feel the heat on my face, my hands, trying to thaw the cold that had settled into my bones. Draven settled on the opposite side of the fire, far enough away that I didn't feel crowded, but close enough that I could see him clearly in the flickering light. The wounds on his chest and shoulder had stopped bleeding, but they still looked angry. Red and swollen around the edges, the kind of injury that would take weeks to heal for anyone human. "Those need to be cleaned properly," I said, the healer's daughter in me overriding the exhausted girl. He glanced down at them like he'd forgotten they existed. "They will heal. They'll heal faster if they don't get infected." I rummaged through my pitiful bag, found the last clean strip of cloth I had. "I don't have much, but the stream water is clear and cold. That'll help." "You do not need to." "I know I don't need to," I interrupted, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "I want to. If that's okay." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe? Or pleasure? He inclined his head in that formal way he had. "It is more than okay." So I moved around the fire to his side, dipped the cloth in the stream until it was cold enough to make my fingers ache, and knelt beside him. This close, I could see the details I'd missed before. The way his scars formed patterns, some from claws, some from blades, one that looked suspiciously like a burn across his ribs. This was a body that had seen violence and survived it. Again and again. "This is going to hurt," I warned, the same words I'd said in the rain. "I know." His voice was low, almost a rumble. "I trust you." 3 more words that hit me sideways. "I trust you," like it was simple, like trust was something you could just give away freely. I pressed the cold cloth to the worst of the gashes, and he hissed through his teeth, his entire body going tense. But he didn't pull away, didn't tell me to stop, just sat there and let me work, his jaw tight and his hands clenched into fists against his thighs. "Tell me something," I said, partly to distract him, partly because I needed to know. "What attacked you?" "A razorback." At my blank look, he continued. Ancient creatures, older than lichens, older than most things in this forest. They are territorial. I crossed into lands they consider theirs. Why? I was tracking something. His eyes found mine. Someone has been attacking my people, killing them in ways that look like animal attacks to human eyes, but we know better. I thought if I could find the source, find where they were coming from. He trailed off, shaking his head. I was wrong, and careless, and I nearly died for it. I moved to the wound on his shoulder, carefully cleaning around the edges. How many people have you lost? 7. In the last 3 months. Pain flickered across his face, and I realized it had nothing to do with his physical wounds. 7 of my pack, my responsibility, my failure. It's not your fault that someone is killing them. I am their king. Their safety is my responsibility. His voice had gone rough. Every death is a failure of my protection. I understood that. Understood the weight of responsibility you never asked for but carried anyway. Understood the guilt of not being able to save people who depended on you. My mother used to say that we can't control what the world does, I said quietly. Only how we respond to it. You're trying to stop whoever is doing this. You're trying to protect your people. That's not failure. That's leadership. He looked at me like I'd said something profound instead of just common sense. Your mother sounds wise. She was. I finished with his shoulder and moved back to sit beside him, close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating off his skin. Not fever, just warmth, like he ran hotter than normal humans. She died when I was 5. Fever took her in 3 days, and there was nothing anyone could do. I am sorry. The sympathy in his voice was real, uncomplicated by the calculations I was used to. When people in the village had offered condolences, it had always been followed by speculation about what would happen to me, whether my father would remarry, whether I'd be a burden. Draven just cared. Simply. Honestly. My father remarried within the year, I continued, surprised at how easy it was to talk to him. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was because he was a stranger who had no stake in my past. To a woman with 2 daughters of her own. Then they had twin sons, and I just sort of became furniture. Something in the house that served a function but nobody really saw. I see you. 3 more words. Simple, direct, true. I looked at him, at this impossible man with his impossible nature and his amber eyes that held more kindness than I'd seen in 17 years of human company, and something in my chest cracked wider. Why are you being so nice to me? The question came out smaller than I intended. He was quiet for a moment, feeding another branch to the fire, watching the flames catch and spread. When I was young, he finally said, my father taught me that true strength is not in domination. It is in protection, in choosing mercy when violence would be easier, in treating others with the respect they deserve simply because they exist. He looked at me. You risked your life for a monster. That deserves more than niceness. That deserves honor. I'm not honorable. I'm just someone who ran away. You are someone who chose freedom over servitude. That is brave. His voice dropped lower. And I suspect you do not know how rare that is. How many people accept chains because they fear the unknown more than they hate their cages? He was right. I'd seen it in the village, in the other girls who married men they didn't love because it was expected, in the boys who took over their father's trades even when they dreamed of something else. Fear disguised as practicality, cages disguised as safety. There is something you should know, Draven said, and there was a careful quality to his voice now, like he was choosing words with precision. About us, about what happens when a Lycan saves someone, or is saved by them. My heart started beating faster. What? We have what we call a bond, a recognition that happens between souls that are meant to meet. It is rare, very rare, but when it happens, it is... He paused, searching for words. Undeniable. Like fate? Some call it that, others call it the moon's blessing. The specifics do not matter as much as what it means. He turned to face me fully, and I could see the struggle in his expression, wanting to be honest but afraid of scaring me. I felt it the moment I saw you. Even dying, even half-conscious, I knew. You are my fated mate. The words hung in the air between us. Fated mate. I should have laughed, should have dismissed it as insanity or fever dreams or some elaborate manipulation. But the sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes, made it impossible to dismiss. What does that mean? I whispered. It means we are compatible. In every way that matters emotionally, physically, spiritually. It means that if we chose each other, the bond could grow into something profound. Something permanent. He held up a hand before I could panic. But that is the key word, choose. The bond does not force anything. It offers potential, not chains. You could walk away right now and it would hurt, but it would be your right, your choice. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying, trying to understand how this man, this king, this creature who could probably have anyone he wanted was sitting here telling me I had a choice, that I had power in this. You are not mine unless you choose to be, Draven said softly, and I will never pressure that choice. I will never use the bond to manipulate or coerce. I am telling you this because you deserve honesty, because hiding it would be a lie. But what you do with this information is entirely up to you. Choice versus control. Agency versus ownership. Everything my family had taken from me, he was handing back without me even asking. I don't understand, I said, my voice shaking. Why me? I'm nobody. I have nothing. I'm just... You are brave, he interrupted. You are kind. You saw someone suffering and you helped, even when it put you at risk. You chose freedom over safety. You are stronger than you know, Issa. His eyes held mine. And you are not nobody. Not to me. Not to fate. Not to anyone who matters. Tears burned at the back of my throat. I'd spent so long being nothing that hearing someone say I was something felt like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. I need time, I whispered. To think. To understand what this means. Take all the time you need, he said immediately. Stay in my territory as long as you wish. Learn about my people, about what this life could mean. And if you decide it is not for you, I will help you find wherever you want to go. He paused. But I will not lie to you. I hope you stay. I hope you choose us. Choose me. But that hope does not obligate you to anything. The fire crackled between us. The stream murmured its endless song. And I sat there beside a wolf king who'd given me more respect in a few hours than my family had in 17 years, and felt something impossible bloom in my chest. Not love, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Maybe the choice to see where this could go. We slept by the fire that night, or at least tried to. I dozed in fits and starts, my body desperate for rest, but my mind racing with everything Draven had told me. Fated mate, bond, choice. The words circled like birds, never quite landing. Across the dying embers, I could see him sitting against a tree, keeping watch even though he needed rest as much as I did, protecting me even in his sleep. I'd never had anyone protect me before. Not once. The feeling was strange, uncomfortable, almost painful in its unfamiliarity. Dawn came gray and cold, filtered through fog that clung to the forest floor like something living. Draven stood, rolling his shoulders carefully, testing his wounds. They looked better, significantly better. The angry red had faded to pink, the swelling had gone down. In another day or two, they'd probably be nothing but fresh scars added to his collection. We should move, he said, offering me his hand to help me up. Another few hours and we'll reach the border of my territory. I took his hand, his skin warm against my cold fingers, and let him pull me to my feet. My body protested. Everything hurt. But hurt was familiar. Hurt I could work through. We'd been walking maybe an hour when Draven suddenly stopped, his entire body going rigid. His head tilted, nostrils flaring, and I watched his eyes shift from human to something more primal. The amber brightened, pupils dilating to slits. "Get behind me," he said, his voice dropping to a growl. "Now." I didn't argue. The tone alone told me everything I needed to know. Danger, immediate, close. I moved behind him just as the arrows came whistling through the fog. 3 of them, black-fletched and moving fast. Draven moved faster. He twisted, grabbed me, and we hit the ground as the arrows buried themselves in trees where we'd been standing seconds before. "Hunters," he snarled, already moving, already putting himself between me and wherever the arrows had come from. "Stay low. Stay behind me." They came out of the fog like ghosts made solid. 5 men, maybe 6, wearing dark leather and carrying weapons that looked designed specifically for killing things bigger than human. Crossbows. Long knives with serrated edges. One had a spear tipped with silver that caught the weak morning light and threw it back in sharp points. "Well, well," one of them said, a tall man with a scar bisecting his face from forehead to jaw. "Draven the Merciful. Long way from your territory, aren't you, King?" "Turn back, Marcus." Draven's voice had gone cold, empty of everything except threat. "You are in neutral territory. You have no claim here. Neutral territory where you've been hiding like a coward while your pack dies." Marcus smiled, and it was an ugly thing. "We've been picking them off one by one. Did you know that? Every time one wanders too far from your precious borders, we're there, waiting." Ice flooded my veins. These were the ones. The hunters killing Draven's people. And they'd found him wounded, separated from his pack, with nothing but a human girl for company. We were going to die here. "Last warning," Draven said. "Leave. Now." "Or what? You'll shift and tear us apart?" Marcus gestured to Draven's wounds, barely healed. "You're half dead already, and we brought silver." He hefted the spear. Enough to finish what the Razorback started. The men spread out, forming a loose circle around us. Draven shifted position, keeping me behind him, his body a wall between me and them. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands had curved into claws even in human form. He was calculating odds, looking for an opening, knowing there wasn't one. "The girl goes free," Draven said, and my heart clenched at the certainty in his voice. "She's human. She has nothing to do with this." "The girl is a witness," Marcus countered. "And honestly, we're doing her a favor. Putting her down quick is kinder than whatever you were planning to do with her." Rage. Pure, white-hot rage flooded through me. Not fear, rage. Because I'd spent 17 years being told I was worthless, being treated like my life didn't matter, and I'd be damned if I was going to stand here and let these men decide I was disposable too. My hand found the knife at my belt, the small blade I'd taken from my stepmother's kitchen when I ran, barely bigger than a letter opener but sharp enough to matter. I pulled it free and stepped out from behind Draven. "Isa, no," he started, reaching for me. "I'm not hiding," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not anymore." Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. "The little human wants to fight. That's adorable." "She wants to survive," I corrected. "There's a difference." Draven looked at me, and I saw something flash across his face. Horror, pride, fear, something that might have been love if we'd had more time. "If you stay, you fight beside me. As equals. Can you do that?" "I've been fighting my whole life," I said. "Just never had anyone fighting with me before." His hand found mine for just a second, squeezed once. "Together, then." Together. The transformation happened in a heartbeat. 1 second, Draven was standing beside me, human and wounded. The next, a massive black wolf had taken his place, easily 8 feet tall at the shoulder, all muscle and fury and teeth. The wounds on his chest and shoulder split open again, blood matting his fur, but he didn't slow down, didn't hesitate. He hit the first hunter like a battering ram, jaws closing around the man's shoulder and bearing him to the ground. The man screamed. Someone fired a crossbow. The bolt went wide. Then chaos. I'd never been in a real fight before. All I knew was instinct and desperation, and the absolute certainty that I was not going to die in this forest without making them work for it. A hunter came at me, knife raised, and I ducked under his swing, came up inside his guard, and drove my tiny blade up under his ribs the way my mother had once shown me to kill chickens, quick, angled. Find the heart. He went down hard, surprise frozen on his face. I yanked my knife free, my hands shaking, blood hot and slick on my fingers. No time to process. No time to feel. Another one coming, this one with a club that would cave my skull in if it connected. Draven was there, appeared from nowhere, and tore the man's throat out before he could swing. Blood sprayed. The wolf turned to me, checking, making sure I was okay, and that second of distraction cost him. The silver spear caught him in the shoulder, the already wounded shoulder, and went deep. Draven's howl of pain was the worst sound I'd ever heard. He staggered, tried to pull back, but Marcus was there, driving the spear deeper, forcing him down. "Not so scary now, are you?" Marcus snarled, putting his weight behind the weapon. "Just another dead dog." Something in me snapped. I didn't think, didn't plan, just moved. Ran at Marcus with my bloody knife and stabbed him in the kidney, twisted, pulled up, and out the way you gut a fish." He screamed and released the spear, spinning toward me with murder in his eyes. Draven lunged. Even wounded, even with silver burning in his flesh, he was faster. His jaws closed around Marcus's skull and squeezed. I heard the crack, saw the light go out of the hunter's eyes. Then Draven dropped him and swayed, silver poisoning spreading through his system, turning the veins around the wound black. 3 hunters left. They looked at their dead companions, looked at me covered in blood with a knife in my hand, looked at the massive wolf barely staying on his feet but still standing between them and me. "Not worth it," one of them muttered, and they ran, disappeared into the fog like they'd never been there at all. I dropped to my knees beside Draven, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the spear. "We have to get this out." The silver, he shifted back to human, gasping with pain, and I could see the damage clearly now. The wound was bad, really bad. Black veins spreading like cracks in glass. The silver doing what silver did to his kind, poisoning, killing, slowly but surely. "Pull it out," he gritted through clenched teeth. "Fast, don't hesitate." I grabbed the spear shaft, slick with blood, and pulled. It came free with a sound I'll never forget, and Draven screamed, his back arching, every muscle going rigid. Blood poured from the wound. "Too much blood. Press here," he gasped, guiding my hands to the wound. "Hard as you can. My body will try to heal, but the silver—" "I know." I pressed down with everything I had, my small hands inadequate against the size of the wound. "Stay with me. Draven, stay with me." His eyes found mine, amber fading to something dimmer. "You fought beside me." "Of course I did. We're partners, remember?" "Partners," he repeated, "and somehow, even dying," he smiled. "My fierce, little human." "I'm not little and I'm not yours," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Not yet. So you don't get to die. You hear me? You don't get to give me a choice and then die before I can make it." He laughed, which turned into a cough that brought up blood. Bossy. "You have no idea." I looked around desperately, seeing nothing but forest and fog and the bodies of the men we'd killed. "Your territory. How far?" 2, maybe 3 miles. I could carry him 3 miles. Somehow, I had to. "Then we're moving," I said, standing, trying to pull him up with me. "Come on, King. On your feet." He looked at me like I was insane. Maybe I was, but he tried. God, he tried. Got his feet under him, leaning heavily on me, and together, bloody, exhausted, barely alive, we started walking. Step by agonizing step. Together. Like he'd promised. Like I was choosing. 3 miles might as well have been 300. Draven was too heavy, too tall, too everything for someone my size to carry, but I did it anyway. Partly dragging, partly supporting, his arm slung over my shoulders and my arm locked around his waist, both of us soaked in blood, his, mine. Theirs stumbling forward because stopping meant dying, and I'd be damned if I'd come this far just to give up now. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he'd mumble things I couldn't understand, words in a language that sounded old and rough. Sometimes he'd go completely silent, and I'd panic, shaking him, saying his name until he groaned, and I knew he was still alive, still fighting. The black veins from the silver had spread across his shoulder and down his chest, spiderwebbing across his skin like cracks in porcelain. I'd never seen silver poisoning before, but I knew enough to know it was bad. That if we didn't get help soon, it wouldn't matter how strong he was or how fast he healed. Silver was made to kill his kind, and it was doing its job. "Almost there," I kept saying, like a prayer or a promise. "Just a little further. Stay with me." The forest changed gradually at first, then all at once. The trees spread out, organized in ways that felt deliberate rather than random. The underbrush was cleared in paths that suggested frequent use. And then I saw the first marker, a carved stone pillar with symbols I didn't recognize but that radiated meaning, territory, border, home. We'd made it. "Draven," I said urgently, shaking him slightly. "Draven, we're here. We're at your territory. What do I do? How do I—" His eyes opened, unfocused and fever bright. "Call them," he whispered. "Howl. They'll hear." "I can't howl. I'm human." "Try." So I did the stupidest thing I'd done in a day full of stupid things. I tipped my head back and I howled. It was pathetic, more like a strangled scream than anything wolfish, but I put everything I had into it. All my fear and desperation and stubborn refusal to watch him die. The response was immediate. Howls erupted from deeper in the forest, multiple voices layering over each other in a chorus that raised every hair on my body. Then figures appeared between the trees, moving fast, and for one horrible second I thought we were being attacked again. But these weren't hunters. These were Lycans. They came in both forms, some human, some wolf, some something in between that my brain couldn't quite process. All of them huge, all of them powerful, all of them zeroing in on us with intensity that should have been terrifying but somehow felt like relief. A woman reached us first. Tall, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that matched Draven's amber, she took in the scene, her king barely conscious, held up by a tiny, blood-soaked human girl in one sharp glance. "Healer," she barked over her shoulder, her voice carrying absolute authority. Then, more gently to me, "Let me take him." "No." The word came out automatically, my arm tightening around Draven's waist. "I got him this far. I'm not letting go now." Her eyebrows raised, something that might have been approval flickering across her face. "Stubborn. Good. But he's too heavy for you and we need to move fast. Trust me to carry him the rest of the way." Trust. That word again. I looked at Draven's pale face, at the black veins spreading like poison ivy, and made a choice. Don't let him die. "Not planning on it," she said, and carefully, efficiently, she took his weight from me. He folded into her arms like a child, this huge man suddenly small against her strength. She turned and started running, moving impossibly fast through the trees. I tried to follow, but my legs, which had carried me through adrenaline and desperation, finally gave out. I went down hard, my knees hitting dirt, my vision swimming with exhaustion and blood loss I hadn't acknowledged yet. Strong hands caught me before I could faceplant completely. I looked up into a young man's face, maybe early 20s, with kind eyes and a concerned expression. "Easy," he said. "You're hurt too." "I'm fine." "You are many things, but fine is not one of them." He said it gently without judgment. "Let me help you, please." That word "please" from someone who could probably snap me in half. It was so unexpected, so contrary to everything I'd learned about power dynamics, that I just nodded and let him lift me like I weighed nothing. The settlement appeared through the trees like something out of a dream. Not crude shelters or caves like I'd half expected, but actual buildings. Beautiful buildings made of stone and timber that looked like they'd grown naturally from the forest floor. Everything was organized around a central clearing where a massive fire pit sat cold and empty. Beyond that, I could see gardens, training grounds, what looked like a smithy, structures that spoke of community and permanence and civilization. This wasn't a pack hiding in the wilderness. This was a society. People stopped what they were doing as we passed, stared at me, this bloody, bedraggled human being carried through their home. But there was no hostility in their gazes. Just curiosity, concern, and something else I couldn't quite name. The young man carried me to the largest building, 3 stories of gray stone with windows that caught the light. He pushed through doors carved with wolves and forests and moons, into a great hall that was warm and well lit and smelled like herbs and wood smoke. They'd laid Draven on a table in what was clearly a healer's space. The woman who'd carried him was there, along with an older man with silver hair and gentle hands who was already examining the wound. Around them stood others, guards maybe, or advisors, all of them focused on their fallen king with expressions of naked worry. "Out," the healer said, not looking up from his work. "Everyone out except Mira. I need room to work." The room cleared immediately. No questions, no arguments. The young man carrying me hesitated. "What about the girl?" "She stays," the woman Mira said firmly. "She brought him home. She's earned the right to stay." The healer grunted what might have been agreement and gestured to a chair near the table. The young man set me down carefully, gave me a small encouraging smile, and left with the others. Then it was just the 3 of us, and Draven, who looked more dead than alive on that table. I watched the healer work in silence, pulling out silver fragments with tweezers that made Draven's body jerk even unconscious, packing the wound with herbs that smelled sharp and clean, muttering to himself in that old language. Mira assisted, her movements practiced and sure. "He'll live," the healer finally announced, sitting back. But it was close. Another hour and the silver would have spread too far. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. You saved his life. Again, from what Mira tells me. I couldn't let him die. Couldn't or wouldn't? Mira asked, something knowing in her voice. Does it matter? No, she said, smiling slightly. I suppose it doesn't. She moved to a basin of water, washed the blood from her hands, then came to crouch in front of me. I'm Mira, second to the king, which means I run things when he's being an idiot and getting himself nearly killed. And you are? Isa. Well, Isa, welcome to Ravencrest. She gestured around us. This is our home. And since you brought our king back alive, I'd say you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like. He said the same thing, I whispered. I know. He told me through the pack bond before he passed out. Told me to take care of you, to give you whatever you need. Her expression softened. He also told me about the bond. About you being his fated mate. My face must have done something because she laughed. Don't worry, we don't bite. Well, we do, but not guests, and certainly not the king's chosen. I haven't chosen anything yet, I said quickly. But you haven't ruled it out either, or you wouldn't have fought beside him. Wouldn't have carried him 3 miles with silver poisoning spreading through his body. She stood, offering me her hand. Come, let's get you cleaned up, fed, and rested. The king will wake when he wakes, and until then, you're under my protection. I let her pull me to my feet, swaying slightly. Everyone keeps saying that. Protection. Like it's just given freely. Because it is, Mira said simply. That's how packs work. We protect our own. And you became ours the moment you saved our king's life. She paused. Unless you don't want to be. That's your choice too. Choice. Always. Choice. Even here, even with these people who could force almost anything they wanted, they kept giving me choice. I need to stay with him, I said. Until he wakes up. I need to know he's okay. Mira studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I'll have food and clean clothes brought here. You can keep watch. She moved toward the door, then paused. Isa, thank you. For bringing him home. For not leaving him to die. We've lost too many already. Losing him would have... She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. I understood. I'd felt the same thing in the forest. That desperate refusal to let go, to give up. She left, and I pulled my chair closer to Draven's bedside. Someone had cleaned him up, dressed his wound properly, covered him with blankets. His face was still too pale, the black veins still visible but fading, and his breathing was shallow but steady. I reached out and took his hand, lacing my fingers through his. His skin was warm, alive. You better wake up, I told him quietly. Because I have questions. So many questions. About this place, about your people, about what the hell a fated mate bond actually means, beyond the poetry. I squeezed his hand. And because I think I might want to stay. Figure things out, see where this goes. But I can't do that if you're dead, so you need to wake up. His fingers twitched against mine, just barely, but enough. Enough to feel like a promise that he'd heard me, that he was fighting his way back. And maybe, just maybe, we'd have time to figure out what came next. Together. I'd been at Ravencrest for 3 days when they came. Draven had woken the morning after we arrived, groggy and in pain but alive, so gloriously alive. He'd looked at me, sitting beside his bed, still holding his hand, and smiled. Actually smiled. You stayed, he'd said, like it was a miracle. Like he'd expected me to run the moment he was safe. I'd just squeezed his hand tighter and told him to shut up and rest. The pack had been nothing but kind. Overwhelming in their curiosity, but kind. They'd given me a room, an actual room, with a real bed and windows that looked out over the forest. They'd brought me clothes that fit, food that tasted like someone gave a damn, and they'd treated me with a respect that still felt foreign. No one ordered me around. No one expected me to serve. When I'd tried to help in the kitchens that first morning, the woman there had gently but firmly told me I was a guest, not labor. I'd nearly cried. Draven was healing fast, faster than should have been possible even for a Lycan. The healer said it was the bond, that having his mate close accelerated the process. I didn't correct the mate part. Wasn't sure what we were yet, but we weren't nothing. We'd sit together in the healing room, him resting and me reading from books. His people kept stories and histories of a world I'd never known existed. Sometimes we'd just talk, about nothing, about everything, about the life he'd built here and the life I'd escaped. It was the most peaceful I'd ever been. And then they showed up and shattered it. I was in the gardens with Mira, learning about the herbs they used for healing, when the commotion started. Raised voices at the settlement's entrance. The sound of someone demanding something in a tone that made my stomach drop because I knew that voice. My stepmother. I stood frozen as they were escorted into the central clearing. My father, my stepmother, and somehow they'd convinced the village magistrate to come with them. Authority to back up their claim. They looked so small here, so ordinary compared to the Lycans around them, but no less dangerous for it. I need to go, I said to Mira, already backing away. Where? She'd gone very still, very alert, a predator sensing threat. Away. They can't see me. They can't. Isa. Her hand on my arm was gentle but firm. Who are they? My family. The word tasted like ash. They're here for me. Understanding and something dark flashed across her face. Then we go together. You're not facing them alone. By the time we reached the clearing, a crowd had gathered. Draven was there too, barely 3 days out from nearly dying, but standing tall and regal in a way that made him look every inch the king he was. When he saw me, relief flickered across his features, followed immediately by concern. My stepmother spotted me at the same moment. There she is! Seize her! No one is seizing anyone, Draven said, his voice carrying that quiet authority that made people listen. You are in my territory. You follow my laws. State your business. My father stepped forward, playing the wounded patriarch. That girl is my daughter. She ran away from home and we've been searching for her for days. We demand she be returned to us immediately. She's a thief, my stepmother added shrilly. Stole from us and fled in the night. We've come to take her back to face justice. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Draven held up a hand. His eyes never left my father's face. What is your name? Robert Ashford. This is my wife, Catherine. And that, he pointed at me with barely concealed disgust, is my daughter Isa, who owes us 15 years of care and keeping. 15 years, Draven repeated softly, dangerously. And in those 15 years, what was her role in your household? She helped with chores, as daughters do. Did she attend school? My father faltered. That wasn't necessary for a girl of her station. Did she receive wages for her labor? She was family. She didn't need. Did she have her own room? Her own belongings? Was she fed at your table? The questions came rapid fire, each one a blade finding its mark. My father's face went red. My stepmother's mouth pressed into a thin line. How we raised our daughter is our business, she snapped. We're here to retrieve our property and leave this place, she said it with such disdain, looking around at the settlement like it was something diseased. Property. Draven's voice had gone very quiet, very cold. You just called your daughter property. A figure of speech. No. He took a step forward, and despite being human-shaped, despite his wounds, he suddenly seemed enormous. Threatening. It was the truth. You view her as property, as something you own, something that exists to serve you. Now you listen here, my father started, puffing up with false indignation. No, you listen. Draven's eyes had started to glow, amber bleeding through the human brown. In my territory we have laws. One of them is that anyone seeking refuge here is granted sanctuary until their case is heard. Isa arrived on my lands of her own free will. She stays until I determine whether returning her would cause harm. Harm? We're her parents. Are you? Draven turned to me, his expression softening slightly. Isa, tell me, did they feed you well? My throat tight. I ate their scraps. After they were done. Did you have a room? A closet. Under the stairs. Were you educated? No, that was only for the boys. Were you paid for your work? No. Were you loved? The question hung in the air like smoke. I looked at my father's face, at the anger there, but no recognition, no remorse, no love, never love. No, I whispered. Draven turned back to them, and there was something terrible in his expression. You kept a child as a slave. Worked her from dawn until exhaustion, gave her nothing, taught her nothing, loved her not at all. And now you come to my territory demanding I return her to you. Tell me, why should I?" "Because she's ours," my stepmother shrieked. "We took her in when her mother died, gave her food and shelter." "You gave her cruelty," Mira cut in, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You gave her nothing any decent being wouldn't give a dog." The magistrate cleared his throat awkwardly. "With respect, Alpha Draven, by our laws, children belong to their parents until majority age, which she hasn't reached. By your laws, perhaps, not mine." Draven's gaze swept the crowd of his people. "We have witnesses here who can speak to Issa's condition when she arrived, who can testify to her treatment. If this were my child, my pack member, and I learned they'd been kept this way, I would demand justice, blood justice." A murmur of agreement rippled through the Lycans. My father went pale. "You can't threaten us." "I'm not threatening. I'm explaining consequences." Draven moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine. The touch steadied me, grounded me. "Issa has claimed sanctuary. She stays until she decides to leave. Not you, not your laws. Her choice." "She's a child," my father spat. "She doesn't get a choice. She is 17 years old. In my culture, that is adult. Old enough to make decisions about her own life, old enough to choose her own path." His fingers tightened around mine. "And she has chosen to stay here, under my protection, as my honored guest." The way he said it, the weight behind the words, made it clear this wasn't just about sanctuary. This was a claiming, not of property of protection, of value, of worth. My stepmother's eyes narrowed. "What has she told you? What lies has she spread about us?" "No lies," I said, finding my voice finally. It came out stronger than I expected. "Just truth. That you worked me like a servant from the time I was 5 years old. That you treated your own children like treasures and me like dirt. That you never once told me you loved me. Never once made me feel like I was more than an obligation you resented. We fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your head. The bare minimum." The words exploded out of me, years of swallowed rage finally finding voice. "You did the bare minimum required to keep me alive so I could work for you. You want credit for that? You want me to be grateful?" "Ungrateful child," my father snarled. "After everything we've done, you did nothing." I was shaking now, but not with fear, with fury. "You did less than nothing. You took a child who'd just lost her mother, and you broke her down until she believed she deserved it. Until she thought she was worthless. Until running into a dangerous forest alone seemed like a better option than staying one more day in your house." Silence, heavy and thick. The magistrate shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should investigate these claims. If there has been mistreatment." "There's been no mistreatment," my stepmother said quickly. Too quickly. "The girl is being dramatic. Hormonal. You know how young women are." "I know how abusers sound when they're caught," Draven interrupted. "And you sound exactly like that." He turned to the magistrate. "You came here to retrieve her. I'm telling you she stays. If you have issue with that, bring your law enforcement. Bring your soldiers. See how far it gets you." The threat was clear. The magistrate looked at the Lycans surrounding them, dozens of them now, all watching with predator eyes, and seemed to realize exactly how outmatched he was. I'll report this to the council," he said weakly. "You do that." Draven's voice was dismissive. "Now leave my territory. All of you. You're no longer welcome here." My father took a step toward me, hand outstretched. "Isa, please, come home. We can discuss this." "I am home," I said quietly, firmly. "This is more of a home than your house ever was." His face twisted with something that might have been hurt but looked more like wounded pride. "You'll regret this. When you're alone and he's tired of you, you'll regret throwing away your family." "You were never my family," I said. "Family doesn't require you to earn love. Family doesn't measure your worth by your usefulness. Family doesn't make you sleep in a closet and eat scraps and believe you deserve nothing better." I looked at Draven, at Mira, at the people gathered around us who'd shown me more kindness in 3 days than I'd received in 17 years. "These people are more family to me than you ever were." My stepmother made a disgusted sound. "Living with animals. How fitting." "Careful," Mira said softly, "and there was real danger in it. You insult our kind at your own peril." The magistrate put a hand on my father's arm. We should go. Now. They went. Walked back toward the settlement's border with their dignity in tatters and their authority meaningless. I watched them disappear into the trees and felt nothing. No guilt. No regret. No lingering obligation. Just freedom. Draven's arm came around my shoulders, pulling me against his side. Are you all right? I don't know, I admitted. I thought I'd feel different. Vindicated, maybe. Or scared. But I just feel empty. That's the grief, Mira said gently. Grieving the family you should have had. The childhood you deserved. It's okay to feel that. I nodded, leaning into Draven's warmth. Thank you. For standing up for me. For not just handing me over. I would never. His voice was fierce, absolute. You are under my protection, my care, and I will kill anyone who tries to take you somewhere you don't want to be. He meant it. I could hear the truth of it, the vow embedded in every word. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely safe. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying the confrontation, my father's face, my stepmother's venom, the way they'd looked at me like I was property they'd misplaced. But more than that, I kept thinking about what I'd said. The words I'd finally spoken out loud after keeping them locked inside for so long. They were never my family. The truth of it settled in my bones like something I'd always known but never had the courage to name. Dawn found me in the gardens again, sitting on a stone bench watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful, peaceful, everything my old life had never been. You're up early. I turned to find Draven approaching, moving easier now, though I could still see the careful way he held his shoulder. He'd been healing remarkably fast, the healer said. Another few days and he'd be completely recovered. Lycan resilience was something I was still getting used to. Couldn't sleep, I admitted as he settled beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. The contact was becoming familiar, comfortable, something I found myself seeking out. Understandable. Yesterday was... He trailed off, searching for words. A lot, I finished. It was a lot. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the settlement wake up around us. People emerging from homes, starting morning routines, calling greetings to each other. A community. A real one. Where people cared about each other beyond what they could extract. I need to tell you something, Draven said finally. About yesterday. About what I said to your father. My stomach tightened. If you're having second thoughts about letting me stay. No. He turned to face me fully, his amber eyes serious. Never that. But I need you to understand what my declaration meant. What it means to my people. I don't understand. He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. The gesture was gentle, almost absent, like he needed the contact to ground himself. When I claimed you under my protection in front of witnesses, in front of the pack, I was doing more than offering sanctuary. I was making a formal claim, announcing my intention. My heart started beating faster. Intention for what? To court you, to pursue the mate bond, to make you mine in every way that matters if you'll have me. He rushed on before I could respond. I know it's fast. I know you're still figuring things out, still healing from what they did to you. I'm not demanding an answer now, but I need you to know what yesterday meant, what you mean to me. Draven, let me finish, please. He squeezed my hand. I've been king for 8 years. In that time, I've had plenty of opportunities to choose a mate. Political alliances, powerful families, matches that would have strengthened my position. I declined them all because they felt wrong. Empty, like going through motions without meaning. He paused, his eyes searching mine. Then you appeared. This fierce, brave human who saved my life without hesitation, who fought beside me against hunters, who carried me 3 miles while I was dying from silver poisoning, who looked at my people with curiosity instead of fear, who treats everyone with kindness even though you were shown none yourself. I'm not special, I whispered. I'm just... You are extraordinary, he interrupted firmly. And every day you stay here, every conversation we have, every moment I spend in your presence, I become more certain. The bond didn't lie. Fate didn't make a mistake. You are meant to be here, with me, with us. Tears burned at the back of my throat. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't know how to be a a mate to a king. I can barely read. I don't know your customs or your laws. I don't know anything except how to scrub floors and keep my head down. I don't need you to be anything except yourself. His free hand came up to cup my face, his touch warm and sure. I don't need a politician or a diplomat. I need a partner. Someone who will stand beside me, fight beside me, tell me when I'm being an idiot. Someone who sees people really sees them and treats them with dignity. That's just basic decency, which is rarer than you think. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. You have a good heart, Issa, a strong one. That's all I need, all I want. The rest we can figure out together. What if I mess up? What if I can't do this? Then we'll fix it. Together. He leaned his forehead against mine, our breath mingling in the small space between us. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to try, to give us a chance, to see where this could go. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of him, the solid reality of him, this man who'd shown me more respect in a week than I'd received in 17 years, who'd defended me against my own family, who was offering me not just protection but partnership. Choice. Always choice. I'm scared, I admitted. I know. So am I. That surprised me. You're scared? Terrified, he said with a rough laugh. I'm responsible for hundreds of lives. One wrong decision could get people killed. And now I'm trying to convince the most stubborn, brave, beautiful woman I've ever met that I'm worth taking a chance on. So yes, scared doesn't begin to cover it. You think I'm beautiful? He pulled back enough to look at me, disbelief and amusement warring on his face. That's what you focus on? Out of everything I just said? I've never been called beautiful before, I said quietly. Not once. His expression softened into something that made my chest ache. Then the world is blind. Or you were surrounded by fools. Probably both. Before I could overthink it, before fear could stop me, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was clumsy and uncertain, my first kiss, my first real choice to touch someone with affection instead of duty. But Draven responded with a gentleness that made my eyes burn with new tears. His hand cradled the back of my head, his lips moving against mine with patience and care, like he had all the time in the world and was willing to let me set the pace. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against mine again. Was that a yes? That was a maybe, I said, but I was smiling. A maybe that's leaning toward yes. If you're patient, if you give me time to figure out who I am outside of what they made me. I can do patient, he murmured. I'm very good at patient. Good, because I'm probably going to be a disaster at this whole mate thing. Partner, he corrected. We're partners, equals. You're not my possession or my subordinate. You're my other half. The person I choose and who chooses me. That's what mates mean to my kind. Partners, equals, choose. The words settled into my heart like puzzle pieces finally finding their place. Okay, I whispered. Then yes. Maybe. Let's try this. His smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something that took my breath away. That's the best maybe I've ever heard. We stayed like that, wrapped around each other in the dawn light, until Mira's voice interrupted us. Sorry to intrude on the moment, but we have a situation. Draven pulled back reluctantly, his hand still holding mine. What kind of situation? The kind where Issa's parents have returned with the village council and half the town's militia. Mira's expression was grim. They're demanding an official hearing. Apparently, your declaration yesterday spread fast, and they've convinced the human authorities that you've kidnapped their daughter. My stomach dropped. They won't let this go. No, Mira agreed. They won't, which means you need to face them. Publicly. Tell the truth where everyone can hear it. End this once and for all. Draven stood, pulling me up with him. She doesn't have to do anything. I can handle this. With respect, my king, yes, she does. Mira looked at me, her expression understanding but firm. This is your story, Issa. Your truth. If Draven fights this battle for you, they'll say you're being manipulated, that you're a victim either way. But if you stand up and tell everyone exactly what you told us, exactly what they did to you, that's power. That's taking control of your own narrative. She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of facing them again, of speaking my truth in front of strangers, made my hands shake. Draven squeezed my hand. You don't have to do this. I meant what I said. I'll protect you. I'll handle this. I looked at him, at this man who'd given me more in a week than I'd had in a lifetime, who was willing to fight my battles without hesitation. And I realized that's exactly why I needed to do this myself. No, I said, standing straighter. Mira's right. This is my fight, my story, and I'm done letting other people speak for me. Pride and worry warred on Draven's face. The pride won. Then we do this together. You speak. I stand beside you. Deal? Deal. The human delegation was waiting in the central clearing, and they'd brought an impressive show of force. At least 30 militia members, all armed, all looking nervous about being this deep in Lycan territory. The village council, 5 old men who probably hadn't left their comfortable homes in years, stood in the center looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. And there, front and center, were my father and stepmother, wearing expressions of wounded righteousness that made me want to scream. The entire pack had gathered too, hundreds of Lycans in various forms, ringing the clearing, watching with predator eyes that made the militia members shift uncomfortably. The message was clear. You are outnumbered. You are outmatched. Tread carefully. Draven walked beside me to the center of the clearing, his presence solid and reassuring. Mira flanked my other side, together, like he'd promised. One of the council members, elderly, white-haired, wearing robes that probably cost more than my father made in a year, stepped forward. Alpha Draven, we come seeking resolution to a delicate situation. There's nothing delicate about it, my father interrupted. That monster has kidnapped my daughter, and I want her returned. Now. Kidnapped? Draven's voice was cold. Interesting word choice. Issa, were you taken by force? No, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Did anyone prevent you from leaving my territory? No. Have you been harmed in any way since arriving here? No. I've been treated with more kindness here than I ever received in my father's house. The council member cleared his throat. Miss Ashford, your parents claim you ran away after stealing from them. They say you've been filling this pack's heads with lies about your treatment. Stop, I said, and was surprised by the firmness in my own voice. Just stop. I'm done letting other people tell my story. So let me be very clear about what happened. What's been happening since I was 5 years old. I took a breath, felt Draven's hand settle on my shoulder in support, and spoke my truth. When my mother died, I was 5 years old, I began, my voice carrying across the clearing. My father remarried within a year. His new wife had 2 daughters from her first marriage, and then they had twin sons together. From that moment on, I ceased being a daughter. I became something else, something less. The council members shifted uncomfortably. I pressed on. I slept in a closet under the stairs. Not a bedroom, a closet that smelled like mothballs and forgotten things. I ate scraps from their meals, standing at the counter after everyone else had finished. I wore their cast-off clothes until they literally fell apart. And from the age of 5 until the day I ran, I worked. Constantly. Endlessly. Cleaning, cooking, serving, maintaining their comfort while receiving nothing in return. You had shelter, my stepmother protested. Food. We provided. The bare minimum to keep me alive so I could work. I cut her off. Don't pretend it was charity. It was exploitation. Of a child who had no power, no voice, no choice. I turned to the council. You want to know why I ran? They tried to sell me. Oh, they called it employment, a position at some lord's estate, but I would have been signing away 5 years of my life with no guarantee of anything except more servitude, so I chose the forest. I chose possible death over certain misery. That's how bad it was. The girl is being dramatic, my father said, but his voice had lost its certainty. All families require children to help. Help, yes. But you didn't treat me like a child. You treated me like property, like something you owned that existed solely for your benefit. I faced him fully now, and I felt no fear. Only a cold, clean anger. Did you ever tell me you loved me? After my mother died, did you ever hug me, comfort me, make me feel like I mattered even a little? Silence. His face reddened, but he had no answer. That's what I thought. I turned back to the council. So here's the truth. I wasn't kidnapped. I was saved. I found people who treat me like a person instead of a possession. Who give me choices instead of orders. who ask instead of demand, and I'm staying here. By my own free will, my own choice. One of the council members spoke up. Miss Ashford, you're 17, still a minor by our laws. Your parents have legal authority. Then your laws are wrong, I said flatly. Because they allow people to abuse children and call it parenting. They protect cruelty disguised as tradition. And I will not submit to laws that value ownership over humanity. Isa, my father started. No, you don't get to use my name like it matters to you. Like I matter to you. I never did, and we both know it. I took a breath, steadying myself. I don't hate you. I don't wish you harm. I just want you to leave me alone. Let me go. Let me build a life where I'm valued. Please. That last word came out softer. Not begging, asking. One human to another. My father's face went through a series of expressions, anger, wounded pride, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of shame. But my stepmother had no such complexity. Her face was pure venom. You ungrateful little. Enough, Draven's voice cracked like a whip. You have your answer, she stays, by her own choice. And if you attempt to force her removal, you will learn exactly why humans fear the creatures in the forest. The threat was clear. Absolute. The militia members looked at each other nervously, clearly doing the math on their chances if this turned violent. The council member who seemed to be in charge cleared his throat. Perhaps a compromise. If the girl wishes to stay, and if she's of sound mind, which she appears to be, we could grant an early emancipation. Legal separation from parental authority. She doesn't need your permission, Draven said coldly. But if it makes you feel better about leaving here alive, file whatever paperwork you want. The result is the same. She stays. The council members huddled together, whispering. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but the presence of several hundred Lycans was clearly dampening his righteous indignation. Finally, the head council member nodded. Very well. We'll process the emancipation. Miss Ashford will be legally independent. The matter is settled. Good, Mira said with satisfaction. Now leave, all of you. They did. This time my parents didn't even try to speak to me. Just turned and walked away, taking their militia and their wounded pride with them. I watched them disappear into the trees and felt the last chains I'd been carrying break and fall away. I was free, actually, legally, completely free. The pack erupted in cheers. The celebration lasted 3 days. I'd never experienced anything like it. The Lycans took any excuse to feast and dance and be together, and me claiming my freedom officially, permanently, was apparently cause for major celebration. They roasted whole boars over enormous fires. They broke out barrels of something they called moon wine that tasted like lightning and made humans very drunk very quickly. They told stories and sang songs in that old language that sounded like wind through trees. And they kept thanking me for saving their king, for choosing to stay, for being brave. It was overwhelming, wonderful, terrifying, real. On the third night, when the moon was full and huge in the sky, Draven found me standing at the edge of the celebration, watching his people dance. Too much? He asked quietly. No, just a lot. Good, but a lot. I glanced at him. Is it always like this? Only when something important happens. He held out his hand. Walk with me? I took it, letting him lead me away from the noise and light, into the forest where the moon painted everything silver. We walked in comfortable silence until we reached a clearing I hadn't seen before. A natural amphitheater surrounded by ancient stones, with a pool of crystal-clear water at its center that reflected the moon like a mirror. This place is sacred to my people, Draven said softly. It's where we perform our most important rituals. Coronations, naming ceremonies, mate bonds. My breath caught. Draven. I'm not asking yet, he said quickly. I wanted you to see it, to know what it would mean if you chose this, chose us, chose me. I looked at the clearing, at the moonlight and the still water and the ancient stones that had witnessed countless ceremonies. Tell me about it, the mate bond ritual, how it works. He settled on a flat stone near the water's edge, pulling me down beside him. It's simple, really. Both partners stand in the water under the full moon. They speak their vows not scripted, just whatever truth is in their hearts. Then they drink from the ceremonial cup, blood mixed with moon wine, symbolizing the joining of two lives into one partnership. When it's done, the bond solidifies, becomes permanent. You'd feel what I feel. I'd feel what you feel. We'd be connected in ways that transcend words. Forever? Unless one partner dies, yes, forever. He looked at me, his amber eyes serious. It's not mind reading, more like emotional resonance. You'd know if I was hurt, or scared, or happy, and I'd know the same about you. We'd still be separate people with separate thoughts, but we'd never be alone. Not truly. I thought about that, about never being alone again, about having someone connected to me in that fundamental way. A week ago, the thought would have terrified me. Now, when? I asked quietly. He went very still. When what? When can we do the ceremony? Isa. He turned to face me fully, his hands coming up to cup my face. Are you sure? You don't have to rush this. We can wait. I can wait. I've been waiting my whole life for you. I can wait as long as you need. I'm sure, I said, and I was, completely. I spent 17 years being nothing, being alone, being unwanted, and then you appeared and you made me feel seen, valued, chosen. I don't want to wait anymore. I want this. I want you. I want us. His smile was incandescent. The next full moon is 3 weeks away. That's too long. He laughed, the sound rich and warm. The moon doesn't care about our impatience. But we can have the celebration now, the ritual later. Give you time to learn the customs, meet everyone properly, be absolutely certain. I'm certain now, I protested. I know, but humor me. Let me court you properly. Let me show you everything this life could be. And if in 3 weeks you still want this, still want me, then we'll stand under the moon and I'll vow myself to you in front of everyone that matters. When he put it that way, 3 weeks seemed reasonable, romantic even. Time to learn, to grow, to choose this with full knowledge instead of desperate gratitude. Okay, I whispered. 3 weeks, but I'm not changing my mind. I'm counting on it, he murmured, and kissed me. This kiss was different from the first, deeper, more certain. His hands in my hair, my hands fisted in his shirt, both of us pouring 17 years of loneliness and 1 week of hope into the connection between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I'm going to spend the next 3 weeks proving I'm worthy of you. You already are, I said, but I won't stop you from trying. The 3 weeks passed in a blur of wonder. Draven courted me like I was something precious, showed me every corner of his territory, introduced me to his people, taught me their customs and language. We'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing. He'd bring me flowers from the deep forest. I'd bring him terrible attempts at Lycan cooking that he'd eat anyway and compliment. Mira taught me their history. The healer taught me their medicine. The children taught me their games. I was learning what it meant to belong. The night of the full moon arrived cold and clear, the sky so full of stars they looked like scattered diamonds. The entire pack gathered at the sacred clearing, hundreds of them in their finest clothes, carrying torches and moon wine and flowers. They formed a circle around the pool, giving us space but surrounding us with their presence. Their family. Our family. Draven stood waiting at the water's edge, wearing ceremonial robes that made him look every inch the king he was. When he saw me dressed in white that Mira and the other women had spent days making, my hair woven with flowers and moonlight, his expression made my knees weak. Love. Pure, uncomplicated love. I walked to him through the circle of his people, and they bowed as I passed. Not to a servant, to their future queen. Ready? Draven whispered as I reached him. Ready, I confirmed. We waded into the pool together. The water cold but not unbearable, the moon huge overhead. Draven took my hands, his grip warm and sure. Isa, he began, his voice carrying across the clearing. I vow to protect you with everything I am, to honor your choices, to stand beside you as an equal, to love you in your strength and your vulnerability, to choose you, every day for the rest of my life. My turn. My hands shook but my voice held steady. Draven, I vow to be your partner in all things, to fight beside you, to trust you with my heart, to build a life with you that is full of choice and love and freedom. I choose you. I choose us. I choose this life we're making together." He handed me the ceremonial cup. I drank. The moon wine burned going down, and something else, something wild and electric, sparked through my veins. Then I handed it to him. He drank. His eyes flashed amber. The bond snapped into place. It felt like coming home, like two puzzle pieces finally connecting. I could feel him, his joy, his love, his absolute certainty. And he could feel me, all my hope and healing and the terrifying, beautiful relief of being chosen. The pack howled, all of them, human and wolf, lifting their voices to the moon in a song of celebration, and Draven pulled me close and kissed me under the stars while our people cheered. I was no longer alone. I was no longer nothing. I was mate, partner, queen. But most importantly, I was chosen. And I had chosen too. 6 months later, I stood in the council hall watching my people argue about winter preparations. My people. I still wasn't used to thinking of them that way. Wasn't used to the title they insisted on using Queen Isa. It felt too big, too grand for someone who'd spent most of her life scrubbing floors. But Draven kept reminding me that leadership wasn't about where you came from. It was about where you were going and who you brought with you. The northern storage needs reinforcement. Marcus, a different Marcus, one of our builders was saying. Last winter we nearly lost half the grain stores to moisture. Then we reinforce it, I said, making a note on the parchment in front of me. How much timber do you need? The discussion continued, practical and focused. Food stores, fuel supplies, making sure everyone would survive the harsh months ahead. It was work. I understood the logistics of keeping people alive and comfortable. Turned out 17 years of managing a household, even under terrible circumstances, had taught me skills that translated well to managing a community. The difference was, here, people listened, valued my input, thanked me for my ideas instead of demanding more. After the meeting ended, I stayed behind to organize the notes, making sure everything was documented. Draven found me there an hour later, ink-stained and focused. "You're going to work yourself to exhaustion," he said, but his voice was warm with affection. Says the man who I literally carried home dying 6 months ago because he worked himself to exhaustion, I countered, not looking up. He laughed and came to wrap his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder as he looked at my notes. "Fair point, but at least I have you to keep me from doing it again." "Someone has to." I leaned back against his chest, letting myself relax for the first time in hours. Through the bond, I could feel his contentment, his pride in what I'd accomplished. It still amazed me sometimes, having that constant connection, never being truly alone. "The children's reading program starts tomorrow," I said. "Are you still planning to stop by?" "Wouldn't miss it." His arms tightened around me. "Watching you teach the young ones is one of my favorite things." The reading program had been my idea. I'd noticed that while Lycan children learned their history orally, passing down stories and traditions, many struggled with written language. Having grown up denied education myself, I'd made it my mission to ensure every child in our territory could read and write if they wanted to. We'd started with 12 children. Now we had over 50, and 3 other adults had volunteered to help teach. It was proof that things could be different, that the cycles of deprivation and control could be broken. "Isa," Draven's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "There's something I want to show you." He led me outside, where the late afternoon sun was painting everything gold. We walked through the settlement, and I waved at people as we passed. Elena, who ran the healer's workshop. Thomas, who was teaching me to fight properly. Little Sarah, who'd started calling me Mama Isa, despite my protests that I was way too young for that title. We ended up at the edge of the settlement, where new construction was happening. A large building, nearly finished, with wide windows and a peaked roof. "What is this?" I asked. "Your project. The one you've been planning for months." Draven's smile was mysterious. "Go look inside." I pushed open the door and stopped, my breath catching. It was a library. A real, actual library, with floor-to-ceiling shelves already being filled with books, long tables for reading and studying, comfortable chairs by windows, a section with smaller furniture clearly meant for children, and in the back, a teaching area with slates and chalk and everything needed for formal education. "How did you—" I turned to find him watching me, with that expression that still made my heart skip. "I only mentioned this a few weeks ago." You mentioned it 6 months ago, actually. The day after the mating ceremony. You said you wished there was a place where anyone could come learn, regardless of age or status or background. He moved to stand beside me. So I made it happen. Well, we made it happen. The whole pack contributed. Built it together because they believe in what you're trying to do. Tears burned my eyes. Happy tears this time, not the painful ones from my past. It's perfect. You're perfect, he corrected softly. You take the pain you survived and transform it into something that helps others. That's real strength, Issa. Real power. I turned into his arms, burying my face in his chest. Through the bond, he felt my overwhelming gratitude, my joy, my still disbelieving wonder that this was my life now. Thank you, I whispered. Always, he murmured into my hair. Anything you need, anything you dream, I'll help you build it. That night, we hosted a gathering in the Great Hall. Not a formal ceremony, just pack members coming together to eat and talk and be. I'd learned these casual gatherings were the heart of Lycan culture, the daily choosing of community over isolation. I sat at the high table beside Draven, but I didn't feel separate from everyone else. Didn't feel like I was above them or performing for them. Just part of them, connected. Mira caught my eye from across the hall and raised her cup in a silent toast. I raised mine back, grinning. She'd become more than just Draven's second. She was my friend, my sister in all the ways that mattered. You're happy, Draven observed quietly, his hand finding mine under the table. I am, I said, and felt the truth of it through the bond. Not the fragile, temporary happiness of a good moment in a bad life, but the deep, settled happiness of being exactly where I belonged. Good. He lifted my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles. You deserve happiness. You always did. Later, much later, after the gathering had wound down, and we'd retired to our chambers, actual chambers, with actual privacy, and an actual bed that was ours, I stood at the window looking out over the settlement. Our home. Lights flickered in windows. People moving between buildings, saying goodnight, heading home. Safe, cared for. Part of something bigger than themselves. What are you thinking about? Draven asked from behind me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders against the night chill. Everything. Nothing. How different my life is now. I leaned back against him. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. That I get to be here. That I get to be yours. You're not mine, he corrected gently, the same correction he always made. I'm not your owner. I'm your partner. There's a difference. I know. I did know. Intellectually. But 17 years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. I was still learning that love wasn't ownership. That partnership didn't mean submission. That I could be valued without having to earn it through endless service. You're doing it again, Draven murmured, feeling my thoughts spiral through the bond. Doing what? Doubting your worth. Wondering if you deserve this. He turned me to face him, his hands gentle on my shoulders. Issa. Listen to me. You are not here because I rescued you. You're here because you rescued yourself. You chose freedom. You chose to survive. You chose to build something new instead of accepting what you were given. You helped, I protested. I offered shelter. You did the rest. His eyes held mine, serious and full of conviction. You integrated into a completely foreign culture, learned a new language, started programs to help others, became a leader that people actually follow willingly. You did that, not me. You. I wanted to argue, but through the bond, I felt his absolute certainty, his pride in me, his conviction that I was exactly who he said I was, strong, capable, worthy. Maybe, I thought, maybe I could start believing it too. I love you, I said instead. His smile was everything. I love you too. Every stubborn, brilliant, fierce piece of you. We stood there at the window, wrapped around each other, watching our territory settle into night. And I thought about the girl I'd been 6 months ago. Desperate, alone, convinced she was worth nothing. I thought about how she'd run into the forest expecting to die and had found life instead. But that wasn't quite right, was it? I hadn't found life. I'd chosen it. Chosen freedom over safety. Chosen risk over certainty. Chosen to see where I could go if I stopped accepting what others told me I deserved. I thought about my family, my old family, the ones who'd tried to claim me and felt nothing but pity. They'd had someone who would have loved them, worked for them, been loyal to them if they'd just offered basic human decency in return. Instead, they'd treated me like property and lost me completely. Their loss, truly. "What are you smiling about?" Draven asked. "Just thinking about how far I've come, how different everything is." I turned in his arms, looking up at this man who'd shown me what respect actually looked like. "Thank you, for seeing me, for treating me like I mattered even when I didn't believe I did. You always mattered, Issa. I just recognized what was already there." Recognized. That word settled into my chest, warm and right. Because that was the truth of it, wasn't it? Draven hadn't saved me, hadn't fixed me, hadn't completed me like I was some broken thing waiting to be made whole. He'd simply recognized what I was too beaten down to see myself, that I was a person, worthy of respect, deserving of choice, capable of so much more than scrubbing floors and keeping silent. The girl who'd run into the forest hadn't needed rescuing. She'd needed recognition. Someone to look at her and see a human being instead of a tool. Someone to offer her choice instead of commands. Someone to stand beside her instead of above her. And once she had that recognition, once someone believed in her worth, she'd done the rest herself. Learned, grew, became. Not into someone new, but into who she'd always had the potential to be. I wasn't a princess rescued from a tower. I was a woman who'd escaped her cage, walked through fire, and built herself a kingdom on the other side. And I'd done it by making the hardest choice of all, choosing to believe I deserved better. Everything else had followed from that. "Come to bed," Draven murmured, tugging me gently away from the window. "Tomorrow's a big day with the library opening." "Tomorrow's a big day," I agreed, letting him lead me to our bed, to our life, to our future. And as I curled up against him, feeling his heartbeat steady under my cheek and his love constant through our bond, I thought about that girl one last time, the one who'd scrubbed floors at dawn while her family slept, the one who'd eaten scraps and slept in closets and believed she was nothing. She'd been wrong. So terribly, painfully wrong. She was never nothing. She was just waiting for someone for herself to finally recognize what had been there all along. She was not rescued. She was finally recognized. And that made all the difference. Thank you for listening to another emotional, magical shifter romance here on Tina Romance Library. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, so you never miss more powerful, heart-gripping romance stories.